Where is the world heading? Is it heading towards peace and prosperity, or are we heading towards very complex, difficult times interspersed with geopolitics leading us into wars? I would like to say we are not heading into wars, but my instincts and knowledge indicates that the risk of war is very large. And I think that the Middle East could be the precursor of a bigger war, because Israel is now rather like a caged lion. Its war with Hamas is not going as well as being made out to be. The West Bank tensions are rising. Hezbollah, again, contrary to what the media is telling you, is being given a bloody nose by Hezbollah. Israel's attack on Iran caused no serious damage at all. And in fact, and again, according to local sources and those knowledgeable about the region, what actually happened was when Israel's first wave of F-35, etc., approached Iran, they got locked on by Russia's sophisticated electronic jamming equipment and basically turned tail. And there was supposed to have been a follow-up with conventional bombers. They were aborted. So what is Israel going to do next? Iran is saying that they are going to hit severely Israel any day now. The comprehensive agreement between Russia and Iran will be signed in Moscow, which covers if one country is attacked, the other comes to its rescue. Why has America sent a fleet of B-52 bombers to Qatar? Why is Israeli frigate or destroyer, I don't know which, apparently armed with ballistic missiles, having sailed through the Suez Canal and is apparently now in the Red Sea? Something is up. So I think that probably it will happen next year. The region is going to explode. And will that lead to some bigger conflict? Because China and Russia will, if necessary, come to Iran's assistance. But it may not be necessary, because Iran has the missile technology, which it showed on its 2 hits on Israel, which were not done to destroy anything, only to send a message that they can penetrate the dome and America's defense systems. So I'm not a betting person, but if I had to bet, it's even money that next year the region is going to explode. Of course, a lot will depend on who's going to be in the cabinet, particularly Secretary of State and Defense. But given Trump's affiliations with Israel, I don't think it changes what might happen in the region. I think there is a possibility that NATO's war over Ukraine with Russia, there is a possibility of change there. But I think any treaty will only be on Russian terms, because what Russia, doesn't matter who is the president, they no longer have any trust in America or what NATO says. But their biggest concern is they do not want any NATO UK/US missiles within hitting distance of Moscow or St. Petersburg. So I emphasize on my personal bet is that Russia will want control over all of Ukraine, because otherwise you can have NATO missiles on their border. That's exactly what they don't want. But I think Ukraine, there's more chance of some peaceful ending to the Ukraine war than there is in the Middle East. Both of them got on so well in the Helsinki 2016 meeting. It was only when they came out and said, shaking hands, and as I was told by a friend who was around there, basically they had a love-in. Problem now is that Congress and the Senate are so anti-Russia. Trump cannot seem to be giving in to Putin. And just to add to the confusion, Putin is being pushed by his people, not just the population, but the people around him, to be much tougher against NATO. I mean, NATO has been attacking Russian military depots and oil refineries. The last I count, it was 29 they'd been hit. Now, prior to the BRICS summit in Kazan, I think that Putin deliberately turned a blind eye because he didn't want any strong retaliation to disrupt the meeting. That meeting has ended. So are we going to be in for a tougher period? As I see things, the consumer is on the point of being tapped out. Look at what's happening with credit cards. And I suspect that a lot of the stats that the BLS and the government has been issuing in the last 6 months are not reflecting reality on the ground. So I think that early next year, as the revisions start coming in, we're actually going to see a much weaker economy. And I think that with global tensions continuing to rise, the first few months of any government could always produce disarray. So I think that for the first 9 months of next year, I think there's going to be a very difficult economic environment. So after the ebullition that we've seen, nearly all stock markets, I think we're going to have a big correction in the first half of next year, plus 10%, maybe as much as 20. And then, of course, we'll get what Trump wants to do, being pushed into the economy, tax cuts, etc. And the US economy will take off later in 2025 and through 2026 and maybe into early 2027. We'll see new highs in equity markets. On the other side of the Atlantic, Europe is in complete disarray. Change of government in Germany is probable. We have a very weak and Marxist-type government in the UK. The UK, as in America, but possibly more so, crime, killings, even in central London. And friends of mine say, don't bet against possibility that within a short period of time that the military won't be patrolling the streets. I've not been to London for 4 years, thank goodness. But I'm told if you walk down Park Lane, you'll see immigrant tents all along the side. I think equity markets in Europe are not investment opportunities. You trade them economically, going nowhere, but downhill. My friend was telling me the government is simply not encouraging the private sector at all. Taxes, everything. And then to crown it all, the floods that came into Valencia and spilled over into Costa del Sol, the government has deliberately lied to the population, turned off all media so that they don't know the truth. But the truth is over 2,000 people have been killed and nothing has been done to support them. Maybe Italy and Portugal are safer havens, but Central Europe, no. France is in a complete mess. You saw it when the farmers revolted against Brussels' new taxes and telling the farmers how they should farm. The farmers rose up. Go through history, it's always been the peasants who started revolutions. So I think we're in that early stage. It wasn't just the French farmers, it was the German farmers, it was the Dutch farmers. Now you've got with this new inheritance tax in the UK, farmers are revolting. Well, I think China's economy has been recovering in the last, where are we now, November, last couple of months. The government, they introduced back in September a monetary stimulus. Today they announced fiscal stimulus, which is basically revolves around a package of 10 trillion RMB, 6 trillion in special bonds spread equally over 3 years to take debt off the balance sheet onto the budget, and another 4 trillion for the same purpose will be spread over 5 years. Beijing holds a full hand of cards which they can play out depending on what Trump does. So they're holding their hand back. There's more to come, at least 2 trillion. But what a lot of people don't seem to understand is that what that first tranche of 6 trillion, 2 trillion a year, does, it allows local governments to start infrastructure projects that have been put on hold Thus, you get the leveraged impact. You employ people, they get pay packets, money to spend again. And the second part of it is a lot of the local governments have not been able to pay their employees. Now they will be able to. So China's economy is on the mend. China's stock market will be very volatile, but the trend will be up. And they are prepared for anything that Trump and others want to throw at them. I know from different people that actually they have been making contingency plans in case there is a war, such as many private sector companies have had to allocate floor space for the PLA to produce goods and components. Gold is coming back into the monetary system with BRICS. It's going to take some years before BRICS can develop their own currency. But in the meantime, what happens is that, let's take China and Russia as the example. Russia has a big trade surplus with China. There is lodged in the PBOC an amount of physical gold that is enough to cover that surplus. So indirectly, gold is coming back into the system. And I suspect that will happen within all BRICS member and partner countries. The long-term trend is to hold physical assets and not financial assets. I think the day will come when China will say our currency is supported by the gold which our citizens own, which is around 25,000 tons. And you can then say, what supports the US dollar? It's debt. Looking at a 5-10-year trend, property, real estate, make sure you've got your food supply, make sure that you can be independent of the national electricity grid by having one of these generating sets. So ensure that you are actually self-contained and not dependent upon any government or government source.